Today, the 8th of December 2022, is the 80th anniversary of the Seacliff Fire, which claimed the lives of 37 women and was the worst fire disaster in New Zealand at the time. Although I have no close personal connection to the event or to the women who lost their lives, when I read about the disaster 16 years ago, I was immediately struck by it, and it has stayed with me for all these years. And as many of you know, it has directed the course of my life for quite some time. In 2006, when I was 15 years old, I began researching and learning about the hospital, the staff, treatments available at the time, and how the lives of the patients were affected by their time at Seacliff. I was gobsmacked by what I learned, and began to realize that this was a dark and largely concealed part of our history, and that it wasn't something a lot of people wanted or were ready to talk about. I began to turn my emotions of shock and confusion into words and music. When I was 19, I had heart surgery, which led to a medical misadventure and resulted in me very nearly losing my leg and becoming incredibly unwell. I suffered not just immense physical pain, but fell into quite a deep depression, wanting for the better part of a year for my life to be over. Remarkably, and perhaps slightly ironically, it was Seacliff that pulled me through that difficult time. Just prior to my surgery, I had begun to put together a cast to create an audio recording of the story and the songs I had written based on the Seacliff Fire. I completed that project in my home studio in 2010. In 2015, at the age of 24, with the help of many of my family members and friends and an incredible cast and crew, I produced and directed Seacliff Demise of Ward 5 on stage at the Mayfair Theatre in Dunedin. 2 years later, the show ran again in Wellington with another incredible cast at the Soundings Theatre in Te Papa. The story of the musical revolves around fictional characters I had created, but included real-life facts and events, ultimately leading up to the night of the fire, much in the same way the story of Jack and Rose leads to the sinking of the Titanic, a film which also uses the names of real events and real people from history. Out of respect to the women who perished in the fire and their descendants, I changed the women's names for the purposes of the play, but did use some elements from a few of their personal stories. Despite using discretion for the production, I do feel that it is important to acknowledge and remember these women not just as a collective group, but as individuals, because they, all 37 of them, as well as the 2 survivors, had their own lives, their own identities, their own stories to tell. Like Marjorie Blakely, who was one of 6 siblings and who sadly lost her mother, father and eldest sister while all in her 20s. Or like Freda Aldous, whose younger brother was killed in the Second World War in El Alamein 5 months before her death in the fire. Like Rita Alexander, whose mother died when Rita was just 3 years old. She was orphaned when her father died in 1938, 4 years before the fire, when Rita was only 22. And Annie Douglas, who'd lost both of her parents by the time she was 13. Isabella Macquarie, who was widowed at the age of 23. Alice Sinclair, who lost her son Graham when he was just 6 weeks old. Lily Brown was one of the 2 survivors of the fire. Lily had 5 sons, but had lost 2 of her sons in infancy. Lily also lost 2 brothers in the First World War. Her younger brother David died in France in 1916. Her elder brother Andrew was killed in Belgium in 1917. Their father also passed away in 1916. Frances Cummings was born on the West Coast and was married to a railwayman named Stanley. Eileen Waring, or Sister Mary Sylvia, was a sister of St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart. Violet Fowler's husband Martin used to travel by train once a month to visit her at Seacliff. I've been told by a member of her family that Violet was a gentle soul. Grace Harrison was dux of her high school and was one of the first women in Southland to formally qualify as a school teacher. These ladies, as well as Christina Black, Helen Brown, Agnes Cross, Marion Donaldson, Elizabeth Gibson, Margaret Gordon, Grace Lowe, Violet Lyons, Ivy McSwan, Jean Manley, Edith Montgomery, Sarah Ann Morris, Anna McKinnon Moore, Matilda O'Brien, Fanny Osborne, Alice Owens, Maggie Parry, Mary Stewart, Mavis Stott, Rachel Sutton, Agnes Tapp, Margaret Thompson, Margaret Thorpe, Emily White, Catherine Wilson, Mary Wilson, and Frances Winslade all died so tragically on this night 80 years ago. Alice Arthur, the other survivor, passed away in 1955. I, of course, never knew these women personally, but they are in my heart today and every day, and I pray for their everlasting peace.